Good afternoon. Welcome to NAESP's webinar on Taking Wallace Research to Practice, 5 Key Practices of Effective Principals. This afternoon's webinar is being recorded, and I would encourage you all to download the PowerPoint presentation for today's speaker. If you have a question, all of you have been muted. I would welcome you to write in your question in the question box, and we will take questions later in the period. With that, I will turn it over to Carol Riley.
Good afternoon. We welcome you to this webinar today based on the School Principal as Leader, Guiding Schools to Better Teaching and Learning. This publication was published by the Wallace Foundation and really draws on 70 reports on leadership that the Wallace Foundation combined through their own case studies and large quantitative analysis that was done since the year 2000. Ultimately, 5 key practices became outstanding in terms of how principals do the work they do in schools each day. The real key to these 5 practices is that all of them need to interact with the other 4 for each part to succeed, or any part to succeed. It's hard to carry out a vision of student success, for example, if the school climate is characterized by student disengagement, or teachers don't know what instructional methods work best for their students, or test data are clumsily analyzed. But when all 5 key practices and all 5 tasks are well carried out, your leadership is at work. As a Wallace Foundation communications partner, we are committed as an organization to get the word out to everyone in the field to help support and encourage principals to not only take care of their own professional development by understanding things like the Wallace Foundation reports, but also to, in practice, make sure that they are taking care of their own needs in terms of learning skills and incorporate them into their daily work. I'm looking forward to sharing some stories, ideas, and learning from my work as a teacher, principal, and mentor, and at NAESP. Working with and for principals and leaders each day is rewarding and allows me to recognize the great efforts and initiatives that are being done by outstanding leaders. Presenting with me today is Dr. Theresa West. She's committed to school improvement efforts through coaching, mentoring, and leading high-quality professional development. Her coaching practice has a large focus on school principals and others who are trying to move forward in life. Theresa is a certified coach and wrote her dissertation on the roles of mentors in developing school principals. After a 30-year career in Virginia Public Schools, Theresa retired from Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia. Prior to that, Theresa taught at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And under her leadership, one school became fully accredited and another moved out of federal sanctions. We all know how difficult it is to bring schools forward in that way, and are proud to have Theresa here as she works with us to share ideas, stories, and learning about the 5 key practices.
Thank you, Carol. We'll begin with a brief overview of the 5 key practices. Researchers note that effective principals shape a vision of academic success for all students, and the key here is for all students. For all of our students to compete in the global economy, they need a strong education, and they need to be held to high standards. When we do this, we begin to close the achievement gap. On school climate, effective principals ensure that schools allow adults and children to put learning at the very center of the day's activities. They support teachers and students, and they have a responsive attitude. The atmosphere created is one of mutual trust and respect, which nurtures good instruction. And that takes us to cultivating leadership in others. You'll hear this again today. We can't create change alone. We need to build capacity for sustained leadership, and that begins with our teacher leaders and spreads throughout our schools. Effective principals work relentlessly to improve achievement by focusing on the quality of instruction. They help define and promote high expectations, support teacher collaboration, and connect directly with teachers in the classrooms. And finally, managing people, data, and processes. Effective leaders make good use of the resources at hand. They nurture and support the school community. They know and understand how to use data and to use it to guide instruction. And they have a process in place to support the effective running of a school.
Today we'll be discussing all 5 key practices for effective principals. But before we begin today, we'd like to take a survey of our audience to find out if you are interested in digging into another topic with more depth, which will help to inform us as we move forward with future webinars and work with principals around the country. So I would like you at this time to answer this question. If we could focus on one key practice today out of the 5, which are all important and all need to work together, which one would you prioritize as most important?
So if you'll take a time right now and fill out which one you think, we'll give you a few moments to do that. Poll is open.
As you're doing that, I'd like to talk a little bit about these 5 key practices in terms of soft skills and hard or technical skills. In our last webinar, we talked about technical skills referring to job-related expertise to perform the work. If you want an analogy of what technical skills are, when you achieve that certificate or licensure for administration, it really is the recognition of achieving technical skills, basically understanding the components of these 5 key Wallace practices. In the previous webinar, we really did share stories about those soft skills, and by soft skills, we're referring to a leader's emotional intelligence, resiliency, ethical behavior, commitment, giving feedback, social skills, being effective at handling disagreements. An effective principal blends both what they know about leading a school and what they know about how to lead people. We'll talk more about this in a minute, the difference between soft skills and technical skills, but first let's see what our poll responses were. And to share these responses with you, our number 1 priority out of the 5 is cultivating leadership in others. Then tying shaping a vision of academic success, improving instruction, and managing people, data, and processes. So most importantly to this audience is 40% of you stated that cultivating leadership in others is the most important priority key practice. We will talk a little bit more about that particular practice as we move along in our work today. But at this time, I want to take a deeper dive into the blending of the soft and technical skills. Remember, those soft skills are the leadership behaviors, and technical skills are those that you need each day to do the work that you do. So we're going to reflect about some great researchers like those listed to help inform us about our overarching leadership behaviors. And Theresa is going to tell us a little bit more about them.
So when I work with a group of administrators, I often ask them to think about a leader they admire. In fact, those of you listening may have someone in mind. Almost always, when people begin to describe this leader, they talk about soft skills. The leader made everyone feel valued. They encouraged and grew leaders. They were optimistic. They enjoyed their work. They showed concern for others. They understood the practice, and the list goes on. Michael Fullen addresses this in his book, Leading in a Culture of Change. He shares a study where 227 highly successful executives were compared to 23 who failed their job. Interestingly enough, all 23 who failed were high in expertise and high in IQ. In every case, their fatal weakness was emotional intelligence. Some principals have had this very experience. They go into a building charged and ready to go. The central office has told them their goal is to turn that school around and raise student achievement, and they plow forward trying to do everything they can at once. Yet, without building the relationships with faculty, staff, and parents and students, this is difficult, if not impossible, to sustain. Fullen tells us that most effective leaders are not off the charts in the IQ sense, but they are those who combine intellectual brilliance with emotional intelligence. So as we look at the Wallace 5 practices, the 5 key practices, they really do depend on each other. And the great news about emotional intelligence is that it can be learned. Daniel Goleman's work provides great examples, and actually as a coach, I use an EQI 2.0 assessment for people to take and use as a starting point. And we have a link to this assessment here at the bottom of the screen you're seeing now. Carol?
The Institute for Health and Human Potential has this quiz that you can take individually, as Theresa just suggested. Theresa, that's a great idea. It really gives you, and possibly used by your staff, an opportunity to look at your emotional IQ. The books that are shown up here are just samples of the books written by Michael Fullen, Daniel Goleman, and Jim Collins. Jim Collins, as you know, authored Good to Great, and that has been adapted in many school leadership training settings. But his book, Great by Choice, released in 2011, really has a lot of information that can be related to the work that we do each day. I was reminded of a story about Prince George's County Schools in Maryland, one of the 6 Wallace districts that are working around the Wallace pipeline. And I attended a meeting last week in which the superintendent of Prince George's County addressed superintendents and assistant principals from around the state of Maryland. During that meeting, he had many staff from Prince George's County there in the audience. One of the first things he said in his welcoming comments was, "And how are you today?" With a resounding voice, the Prince George's County staff answered, "Great by choice." And as I've attended other meetings in Prince George's County, I realized that the superintendent there truly commits to having a school district that is all working towards the same vision, and that vision is being great by choice. Jim Collins' book is a very good source if you have not looked at that in your professional development resource list. He also discusses a level 5 leader in his writings in the Good to Great book. This refers to the peak of a 5-tier hierarchy of leadership characteristics. A level 5 leader is someone who embodies a paradoxical mix of personal humility and professional will. Michael Fullen's book, The Principle 3 Keys to Maximizing Impact, in this he challenges the status quo and lays out what is a truly effective principle and what that principle does to be successful. All 3 of these authors really embody the ongoing continual rotation of using your soft skills, those skills that are representative of your leadership behaviors, along with the technical skills and understanding in a very deep and contextual way of how the work is done.
So our first key to leadership is shaping, a vision of academic success for all students based on high standards. Here's a picture of the students at McNair. I love this picture. It's helpful for me to keep pictures and images of students in mind as I craft or work with people to craft a vision. What do we want for our students? What do our parents wish for them? And what are our students' hopes and dreams? How will we support their success? When we live and work according to our core values, they become the driving force behind our actions. There is a lot of pressure facing teachers and leaders in schools today. When people feel overwhelmed, they tend to lose sight of what's important, of why they went into education. Taking time to create or realign a school's collective vision is so important. I love the question, what is our purpose? It's simple, it's deep, and it provides us with long-needed time to reflect. It generates wonderful ideas and a huge list of what we do. In doing this with the faculty, teachers brainstorm, share, revise, shorten, and fine-tune a school's purpose. When trying to activate that sense of purpose, asking teachers to reflect on a teacher who most influenced them is helpful. What teacher most influenced you? And what made that teacher great? Why did you go into teaching? In this crazy, busy, hectic time, taking time to remember why we are where we are and fine-tuning our vision makes a great difference. We want teachers to be intentional about planning for instruction, student learning, and work they do. When we know why we exist, we can be better at choosing how we will work together.
What great questions, Theresa. I think having teachers reflect on what attributes a teacher had that was impressionable on their growing up period in their K-12 education, I think is really important before individuals think about their own personal vision and then the vision for a school. So here you are, a principal. You may be a new principal to a school, you might be an experienced principal in a new school, or you might be in the current school that you are serving in for a number of years. But you need to think about your school's vision, and it may be time to take a look at that again. So here's something that one of the principals that I worked with in Ohio at Elizabeth Jones Elementary School. And the principal, Susan Joseph, decided to start a conversation about the school's vision. She really needed to make some changes, and she didn't know where to start. So she used the SWOT analysis that many of us have used over the years. This is a great tool for bringing conversation forward. It's based in the 4 quadrants: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So when she had her teachers start looking at and thinking about their vision of academic success for all students, they began the work by the SWOT analysis and began a deeper conversation about their own vision and commitment to the work. So they tried to represent what they saw from their own personal lens was happening in their school in its currently. So as you look at this, you can see the strengths that they came up with, and this is truly just a short list of what they came up, just as an example, and some weaknesses, some opportunities, and some threats. When we look at the threats quadrant, and what Susan looked at was some of these things we have control over, some of the things we do not have control over. So some of those things were really attacked in terms of the school coming together and seeing how they could move some of those threats to opportunities, or maybe look at some of the weaknesses and how they could move them to strengths. But this was just the first step in the process. They were creating the vision, they were starting the conversation. Ultimately, they knew that they needed to come up with a vision statement that would truly embody in a very simple way what they were all about. And this is the vision statement that they came up with. All students will achieve academic and personal success. It's simple, it's clear. All students, all teachers, all staff, and all parents believed that everything they did created a situation where all students, with the focus on all, as the Wallace 5 Key Practices reinforce, all students will achieve academic and personal success. And then they set off on the journey to see how that would look in their schools. They looked at understanding their own vision, the vision of the school, and then they took an assessment individually of what their personal commitment was to that vision. As the key practice says that we need to create a vision where all students will learn, we really start with ourselves. And the principal, Susan, realized that each person really did have to look at their own personal commitment. And these are just some examples of some questions that each person asked themselves as the new vision and the plan that they had going forward to make changes in their school was going to happen. So these are just examples of things that you too can use in your work.
So we're going to venture into teamwork for just a moment, and I'd like to give you a chance to read this slide, a quote from Andrew Carnegie. When you create a climate where every person in your building is committed to the success of each other, there is no stopping you. When leaders go into a building that needs serious help, the task may seem insurmountable, and it is indeed if you choose to do it on your own. The power of a team is amazing. We all know the stories of uncommon results achieved in school. And if you read the Wallace report, you will see several that they have there and share with you. When we work together, the sky really is the limit, and it's a lot more fun. So when, in terms of school climate, and this was actually, Carol, if you remember the one I think we should just briefly touch on this slide, since that was not the one people put as a key point in the beginning. But the first thing I think as a leader in a school we need to be able to do is build on strengths. And I love the appreciative inquiry process. As a new leader to a building, when you go in, you will already have perhaps a mandate from the central office about what you need to change. But it's really important to take time to learn what's going well, who's doing a great job, what do teachers hold dear. And principals have all sorts of different things they've put on their entry plans and ways to get to know a faculty, staff, and a school community. But building on the strengths and finding out what they do well and moving forward from there is a wonderful way to begin.
As we move forward, think about how you create a climate hospitable in your school. If you are having a barrier, or if you are looking at something that is holding your school back from making change, or possibly it's someone holding you back from making a change, think about what you might do to attack that issue. If you have an individual that would create a situation that maybe wouldn't be what we would consider a team building or having a collaborative work with the team, holding that team back. Let's think about what you might do. And Theresa's going to talk a little bit about maybe overcoming that barrier.
And so when we talk about having and sustaining our school culture, in a perfect world, all we need to do is create the vision, and everybody is lockstep along the way. In a perfect world, our shared vision would be flawless. Unfortunately, as many of you may attest, in a school, every adult may not be on the same page. And this requires us to have some difficult conversations with people involved. I'm sure that if all of you took a minute to pause, you could think of one difficult conversation in your school that needs to take place right now. If you haven't had it yet, perhaps you are avoiding it. I certainly found reasons to avoid some conversations. I might not have been up for all the drama. I might have thought, if I can do it tomorrow. I'd like you to take a look at this slide and think about it in thinking of an important conversation you need to have. In the box, the question box, write why you might be hesitating to have that conversation.
Great question, Theresa. And in the work in our NAESP mentor program, when we ask mentors as they coach their proteges into becoming better decision makers and how to attack issues that they might be having in terms of creating a climate or culture hospitable to education, many proteges come up with reasons like, oh, I don't know what to say. This teacher is one of the individuals on the staff that everybody else respects, but everybody doesn't sit in the classroom and see the lack of instructional strategies that this teacher uses. So I don't know how to build that opportunity to have a difficult conversation with that particular teacher. So there's many ways that you get held back from having that important conversation. So as you think about someone and think specifically, and as you write why you are hesitating to have that conversation, just please share that with us, and we'll be talking a little bit about that as we move along.
So we have one comment from Mary. Mary says, parent engagement is a real issue in my school. We are working hard to overcoming the language barrier for our 20% ELL families. Do you have any research-based strategies that could be helpful to our school?
I can tell you in working with principals, I've seen a variety of things that they do to include parents in the school day. There are some parents some schools, who've managed to carve a parent center into one of their classrooms. And they may have parents come in who actually volunteer to do work that you don't need language with. They'll help they'll help teachers cut things, copy things, and just get comfortable being in the school. Other schools have offered a Spanish-speaking parent liaison or a Spanish-speaking staff member. In one school where I worked, they had an Arabic-speaking staff member who would hold meetings with the parents, and they would interpret for a teacher and create some make and take things for the students to go home with. Some schools have an early literacy program where parents come in with their toddlers and they work on basic literacy skills together. So there are a whole variety of things that you can do, and with the ESOL families in your school.
And Theresa, I would like to add that when you are looking at any kind of an issue, in this case, parent engagement issue, to make sure that you have all the data so that you can do your own action research around what is causing the lack of parent engagement. Is it a language barrier? Is it parents working and not able to come in? Is it a parent fear of the school because their culture might not afford them the comfortable situation to come in and talk to teachers and principals? So I think collecting the data, doing an appreciative inquiry about all of the information that you can gather. If you have all that information, then maybe doing a SWOT analysis or looking at one of the Baldrige quality tools to make a plan to put in place to determine what strategies you can directly align to what the issue is and the reasons why parents are not being engaged. We'll also be able to, Mary, we can contact you personally and get you a little more information about that. Thank you so much. As we talk about this, having the difficult conversation, and what are some reasons that you are not maybe ready to have the conversation, I want to share an idea that may be helpful. When you prepare for a conversation, whether it's with a parent, a group of parents, whether it's with a staff member, you really need to have a plan. You need to practice the conversation. There are a couple of resources that are possible, that could be possible helpful tools for you. Resources around this to really support creating a positive climate in your school are books by these individuals around crucial conversations and having difficult conversations to discuss matters that are most important. The Crucial Conversations book is something that we use with our mentors and proteges to really spark some deep and complexity in the thinking about how to engage individuals to all take responsibility for creating a positive climate. An article called We Have to Talk, a step-by-step checklist for difficult conversations is by a researcher by the name of Judy Ringer. This we also use in our mentor program as we're helping aspiring and assistant principals reflect on their work as they prepare to take over a school building, the leadership in a school building. This is an excellent article, and it starts out by telling you to really understand your purpose for the conversation, and then moving to thinking about what assumptions you already have about the person that is creating this barrier for you or your school to move forward. And then to also understand on a personal level what buttons are pushing you. Think about the last difficult conversation you've had with somebody. Sometimes we react to situations from an emotional standpoint, and we really delved into this in our last webinar about purposeful principling, and I would encourage you to go to the NASP website and take that webinar. It's archived there for you. But it really talks about what buttons are pushed and how you react to individuals in your community that may embrace change, may embrace a movement to improve in other people, but it also means that you need to understand yourself. So Judy Ringer does talk about those kinds of things in her article. So we would recommend these to you as you move along in your leadership.
And for those of you who are members of LinkedIn, just today Daniel Goleman published an article called The One Reason People Don't Want to Work for You. And he says, of course mistakes need to be corrected, but you want to help your employees get the information they need to have to improve. With careful conversation planning, instead of shutting people down, you become the leader who people want to work with, which means someone who cares about me, someone who understands me, and someone who's going to help me find ways to improve instead of look at how I've blown it. Now we're on to cultivating leadership in others. And at the beginning of the webinar, this was actually the slide that most of you, or the key practice that most of you had a great interest in. If I could change this practice, I would move it to say, this key is to cultivate leadership in yourself and others, because the best leaders are learners. And for a school to become a true professional learning community, we need to cultivate other leaders, we need to cultivate our own learning and that of the school community. When I was a principal at the beginning of the year, I had goal-setting conferences with the teachers, and I asked them, where do you see yourself in 5 years? If they weren't sure, we explored together. We would talk about their interests. Some people wanted to remain at their grade level subject for years. Others might have had an interest in reading, technology, school administration, or cultivating parent partnerships. This was a great way for us to get started. Then I would encourage a teacher to join our technology specialist for some training, shadow an administrator for the day, co-present with the reading teachers, lead a parent workshop, or attend a meeting of interest with one of us. Teachers would lead the data meetings, mentor new teachers, serve on a committee, or follow a specific interest. Each task leads to a more prepared faculty, providing areas of expertise, providing opportunities for teachers to share with each other, and ultimately building a stronger learning community. As a principal, we know we have to get into classrooms. Is there hidden talent on your staff? Do you have teachers who are quietly doing excellent work but prefer to keep to themselves? Some teachers are content to focus on their own students. In this era of a collaborative culture, we need to tap that talent. Nurturing talent and fostering teacher leadership is one of the most important facets in creating change in a school. At times, teachers may be surprised to be tapped. We often hear, "I'm just doing my job." They don't realize that they're modeling exemplary teaching and that they have the potential to be leaders and change agents. Some teachers may be nervous about leading workshops. You may want to have them start by having faculty come and observe them. Other teachers are working on master's degrees or additional certifications. Find out what they're doing. How can you help them with experiences, observations? Ask them for their opinions about the latest learning, and ask how their learning plays into our daily work. How does it support our school vision? Developing teacher talent is one of the most rewarding aspects of the job. In my last school, one of our teachers went on and is currently the principal of that school now, and our guidance counselor is currently serving as assistant principal. We tapped their talent. We knew they could do great things, and they're doing great things today.
Thanks, Theresa. The cultivating leadership in others really represents the fact that we know that we can't do it alone, that we have to really nurture that talent, and you really expressed that so well. This quote by Margaret Mead, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does," really is relevant to our discussion about cultivating leadership.
By cultivating leaders, we cultivate learners, and that's really at the foundation of our professional learning community.
Howard Gardner, a researcher, also talks about in his literature the importance of understanding multiple intelligences. And he looks at leadership and what are those areas that leaders do in the levels of multiple intelligences that would consider them outstanding or effective. Some of his key points are listed here, that leaders are able to bring together and motivate really varied individuals. And one of the important things that he talks about is provoking deeper thought through telling stories. I don't know if everybody is a great storyteller, but it's certainly a skill that could be practiced. And when you listen to great speakers and when you listen to great motivators, usually the analogies and the stories they tell really do make the difference. And those are the things that really set images and vision in your minds about what works. So being really cognizant of about those things and the multiple intelligences that Howard Gardner talks about is really important to move you from being an average principal to being an outstanding principal. It really reminds me when we talk about cultivating leadership and the ideas that Theresa shared about a professional learning community that I had seen in Fairfax County. And Dwayne Young, the principal at Centerville Elementary School, has had professional learning communities in his school for a long time, and I don't know that he still calls them PLCs, but they really were incredibly effective. When he brought his groups together, and he had multiple PLCs, usually organized through grade level teams, and he created a schedule that worked. He created roles, or rather the team created roles in which each of them had an important part for that PLC to operate. He and his team worked around norms that would manage and oversee the working of that PLC so that they were clear about what they did and really had clear outcomes for each of the students that were discussed in the PLC. This is really bringing it all together as you develop leadership and make sure that each of your staff members whom you're responsible for is effective in the work that they do.
Improving instructions to enable teachers to do their best and for students to learn at their utmost. We have a variety of things here that all contribute to improving instruction, but at this point I'm going to go down to the bottom and take a deeper dive into collaborative learning visits. Collaborative learning visits are when teachers are able to go in and get a snapshot of how the school's doing on a given day. They recognize what's working well and what as a school we might want to improve. We did this at McNair Elementary School, and it's been done in many schools. Getting it started takes a little bit of finesse and challenge because teachers are initially uncomfortable with it. So we began by asking for volunteers who would be visitors and volunteers who would be observed. We trained everybody in looking for student engagement strategies. The very first collaborative learning visit, the administrative team walked with the principals, and we actually had a checklist that people filled out, and there was a rule for the checklist. No names. We were looking for engagement strategies that we put in place, and the checklist would be only looked at by the teachers and shredded. So what we came out of at the end of the walk each day was, here are the great things that are happening at our school, and here are some things we might want to think of. And the teachers actually put a letter together for me to send out to everyone, but it was for the teachers, by the teachers. An unintended consequence of this The first day we did it, people were nervous, and everybody stepped up their teaching because they knew their colleagues were going to watch them, and they wanted to be at their very best. Their colleagues went in and were bowled over by their teaching and said, oh my gosh, I need to try this, I need to try that, and they stepped up their teaching. We started with 8 classrooms to be observed and 8 teachers observing. By the end of the year, we had a staff of over 100 teachers. Everybody had joined in to be observed or to be observed or to be an observer. And it became a process that really improved instruction across the board and led teachers to have a real appreciation for each other. A 5th grade teacher may not realize everything that goes on in 1st grade or how that contributes to what leads up to it. So this was one way, one tool that we used to improve instruction, and it was a tool where we actually took teachers who were interested in leading this, and as the walks went on throughout the school year, the administrators stepped out and the teachers took them over. And that's what feels at the heart, to me, that's the heart of the teachers forming the learning community and learning and supporting each other. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. I'm one slide ahead of you, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, dear webinar participants, I've lost my place. So right now, we're taking a quick look at professional learning teams. And Carol?
Professional learning teams are really important as you pull individuals together to improve your instruction. And again, it's the work around professional learning communities. It's understanding the strengths of each of the individuals on your staff. And you can use many tools out there. We did the emotional quotient. We talked about that. There's also the Strength Finder process, and there's other processes that you can use to help teachers understand not only their own strengths, but the strengths of the people they work with. It should be an open, reflective, transparent process as you bring people together. And then as you're developing professional development, really collecting the data and really taking assessment of what are the backgrounds of your staff, what is the backgrounds of each teacher. Are the teachers that have backgrounds in math that really aren't using their inherent talents in math to help inform the math curriculum of the whole building. So really take a look at what the strengths are. When I got my first principalship, I took a very close look at all the folders, all the evaluations, all of the backgrounds and resumes of each staff member. I graphed out that information and took a really deep dive into what kind of professional development engagement activities did they entertain in the last 3 years. What did the district send them to do, and what did they self-choose? When I graphed all this out, it was pretty clear that there was a really strong overall professional development support by the district in language. What we lacked in was anybody that had a really strong science and math background. So we knew we had to really do some work there. The interesting part was our scores, our test scores at the same time were lower in math and science. So once you look at everything from data to professional development, everything is really tied in together. And the learning visits in the classroom of one teacher to another really kind of cements that whole vision of everybody working together and the collaboration, and we're all in the game, all contributing, and we are better as a team than each individual. So all of these 5 key practices really work together.
And our final key is managing people, data, and processes to foster school improvement. We want to make sure that we put systems into place, that we use systems that are in place. If the systems aren't working, we refine them. And we build processes into what we do. Data drives instruction. We need to help the teachers be leaders of the data as opposed to having data presented to them. They need to be able to manipulate it, to look at it, to see what do we want to do to change and how can we use this to inform our teaching. This is the final key, and it puts the systems and processes into place. It's something you might want to review with your admin team, with your school teacher leadership team, to make sure that everything you're doing contributes to school improvement. And here I am, back to the slide I thought about a little bit earlier. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. In our fast-paced world of school leaders, it's important to allow time for you to process, integrate, and reflect on the learning and your interactions with others. We hope that you had a little time to do that in our session today, and that you're able to see how the 5 keys fit into the big picture of school improvement, and how you in turn can continue your good work in creating and supporting strong and effective schools.
As we're developing our proteges, and these are the new leaders that are going to be taking over our schools in the future, as we look at the skills that they come with in their first years in administration, we know that there are gaps. Our mentor program has really looked at what those gaps might be, and I would say the one thing is they don't have their own collegial support teams. And reflection is, research shows us that reflection is one of the most important ways that adults learn. But they learn even more if they reflect in teams and have collegial engagement with peers that are not only in the same career levels that they are, but maybe are progressing and are at experience levels. So all people need to contribute to the learning, and reflection is one of those ways to do that. But you need to be really intentional about it. As a school leader, you have to create situations where reflection is really focused on whatever the topics are that need to be changed. And maybe you go back to your school vision, and maybe you go back to those issues that are barriers. Maybe you go back to that individual who is the barrier in your school that you need to have the crucial conversation with. Whatever you do as a school leader, reflecting on your own practice as an individual and creating your own peer collegial support system is incredibly important as well. We'd like to answer some questions. If any of you have any questions, please type them in the question box. But I do want to reflect back to something that an individual wrote earlier when we were talking about why you don't have those crucial conversations. Someone had written that they don't have the difficult or crucial conversation because the staff member that they need to have the conversation with is really connected, has been in the school for a long time and has been really connected, and they know that that unassumed power sometimes goes to certain people without your even knowing that. So one of the things that I thought about when that was written is a story that a principal related with me. He was a principal in a small district out in Utah. And in that district, the closest McDonald's was 25 miles away. So it kind of tells you the isolation of where his school is. the individual that he was having difficulty with was a 6th grade teacher, and it just happened that that staff person, that 6th grade teacher, was the husband of one of his classroom assistants, who happened to be the sister of one of the board members. And often, as you know, in many of our communities, there are people that are connected. So things that you do certainly don't stay in a confidential manner at all times. So you have to be cognizant of the community and the culture of the community that you're working in. As he reflected and did all of the things that we just discussed, he came to the conclusion that that individual, that 6th grade teacher, had some needs that he had to attend to. And one of the solutions that he attempted to do was not to ignore the crucial conversations he needed to have, but to go in and give that 6th grade teacher time every day, go in and greet him, go in and ask him how things were going and what his plans were for the day, and to really make a connection, basically give him the attention and start to rebuild a relationship that had kind of worn away. As he did that, he said it worked throughout the first few months and continued as his relationship grew. So he kind of used his soft skills, which we talked about in the beginning of the webinar, our soft skills and our technical skills. He used his soft skills to make change to better reflect the 5 key practices that the Wallace Foundation has found to be the most effective to create a full circle of school leadership. We also have, so with that story, I hope it helps in terms of how you need to be creative as a leader and use your emotional intelligence. One of the questions, and Theresa, I'm going to refer this to you. One of the questions that came through is, I am preparing an assistant principal. How do I use the 5 key practices to help that assistant principal be prepared?
Well, Carol, I think one of the important things in working with people is to develop a framework. So we have here through the Wallace Foundation a framework that's already been developed for us. So as we work with our assistant principals, and our goal certainly is for them to become principals and even more effective leaders than we are, if we have conversations focusing different days on the different practices, or sometimes assistant principals do amazing things and they don't even know what they've done. If we can discuss that and show how it fits into the key practice and how they can build on that, it's amazing. The other thing I would ask my assistant principals to do, because I think for me to grow and learn, I need to get feedback, even if it's not always positive. So if they saw something I did as a leader that they might have thought to do differently, I asked them to bring that up with me. And I would ask them, let's talk about it through the lens of these keys. Where do you think I could show some improvement?
Great, Theresa. Thanks so much. Well, we'd like to thank all of you for participating in our webinar today. We hope we gave you some ideas or at least some reflective thought for your future. Please stay tuned. NAESP will be doing additional webinars and have additional articles and communications about the Wallace Foundation work. So stay tuned and check our website for our future scheduled activities. At this time, we would like to thank you for participating with us and like to leave you with this last quote. As school leaders and principals, we are fortunate to work in an honorable profession where we have the power, the ability, and the compassion necessary to make the world a better place. We thank you each and every day.